up, everybody? We got the fucking flow going today. So it is August 7th, 2026. We are coming for our new series because we started when we were doing lives. We kind of deemed what I was doing on Sundays as Stoic Sundays, and I like that. I think that was cool. But based on my schedule, I can't do lives on Sundays anymore. Between polo and a couple other prior commitments during the summer. So we decided to switch it to Mondays and Fridays, but I wanted to come up with a name. So I like the Stoic thing, but I also wanted there to be a difference, right? So being the Stoic Viking, we now have Stoic Mondays and Viking Fridays, all right? Which Mondays are going to be like, we're going to talk about the video because my long form videos are released every Saturday. So I figured we talk about the videos and then whatever specific topic that week. And then Fridays will be more of like a roundup of the stuff going on and more of a Q&A, more of a round table, if you will. Hey, what's up, everybody? Calvin Compliant, TC Bub. Good to see everybody. All right, so let's get into this as I fuck this up. All right, let me get my fucking notes. All right, so as I saw about every Friday, so every Monday and Friday, it's gonna be 3 p.m. Hey, what's up, Kai? All right, so yes, every Monday or Friday, it's gonna be 3 p.m. So I was kind of playing with the times, but just my schedule is more consistent that I can do 3 p.m. every single time. And Mondays will be the sort of like discussion topic for the week and also going over the video that we did on Saturday. And then Friday will be all around roundup. All right. So, but to get into this news, I'd like to focus on one specific thing. And one thing that I think is really cool that just got announced yesterday is, look, I'm a giant nerd and I want to go to space one day. And say what you want about Elon Musk, but I love that SpaceX is doing, right? Some of you guys don't know this, but I've done a couple things in my life, but I'm not done yet, right? And I want to be an astronaut, right? I might be too old for this shit, but you know what? We're going to give it a try. So probably in the next year or so, I'm going to start my process where I want to start doing things like start going back to school and everything like that, doing a couple of programs to make myself want to eventually go to the astronaut program, because I don't want to be a passenger in space. I want to go into space. So I love everything that SpaceX is doing. I enjoy Elon Musk in a lot of ways. I know some people don't like it, but it is what it is. But I just saw that they announced the Terrafab yesterday. And I don't know if you guys have fucking seen this shit. But this shit is cool as fuck. Just posted this yesterday, I believe, on. Oh, that is sexy. You know what's funny? I'm glad that you actually made that comment, because I was thinking that. I was watching this video earlier. I was like, I'm feeling some Tron Legacy vibes going on in this video. So I definitely. Right? Hey, I don't hate this. All right? I don't hate this at all. All right? We're going to space, baby. That's all I know. I don't care how it's done. I don't care if I'm like 70 years old by the time I accomplish it. I'm going to space as a mission specialist, not a fucking passenger, but space, baby. Going to fucking outer space. All right? Bro, he's the richest man in the fucking world. I'm pretty sure if he can make rockets
Elon Musk has just confirmed where he is building what he calls the largest and most valuable building on Earth. It is called Terrafab, a chip factory in Grimes County, Texas, just north of Houston.
Everything's bigger in Texas,
Tesla and SpaceX are putting in $16.8 billion to get it started. The plan is more than 100 million square feet of manufacturing space.
Going to space affordable.
For scale, Tesla's Gigafactory in Texas is around 10 million. And everything happens in one place. Logic chips, memory, packaging and testing under a single roof, which the companies say lets them improve.
Pros and cons
Designs far faster than the usual supply chain allows. What comes out of it? AI 5 and AI 6 chips for Optimus robots and self-driving cybercabs, plus high-power D3 chips built to run SpaceX's space-based data centers. Intel has already signed on to contribute, and SpaceX filings suggest the full multi-phase build could eventually reach $119 billion. The site is set to employ at least 3,000 people from Grimes and Brazos counties, and SpaceX says it will draw water from the Gibbons Creek Reservoir instead of local groundwater.
All right. So let's remove that. Okay. So Elon not only wants to build stuff on the moon, he wants to build stuff on Mars, baby. Like the moon is like, he doesn't, honestly, I don't think he, like, other than it's a progression thing, but that man wants to go to Mars at the very least. Of course you think this is going to allow this without serious oversight. Well, there's oversight with everything. Like that's not going to stop this project, right? The one thing that he has proven is that if he wants to do something, he's going to get it done, right? If you guys have not actually read his autobiography, it's actually a really good read, because there's a really interesting story. If you guys don't know this, he actually was hours from going bankrupt in both Tesla and SpaceX, because he was actually borrowing money from Tesla to pay for the rockets, and it wasn't until like hours before he had to pay payroll, he was going to have to file for bankruptcy, did he get awarded the NASA thing. So this man bet everything all on these rockets, because this has been his dream. Like electric cars and all these other things, like, yeah, that's cool. That's not what, but his dream is space. His dream has always been space and making us an international species. So, you know, there's definitely going to be oversight. You can't build anything and there not be oversight, especially if you are planning to build the largest project. But as you can tell, this man, you can't stop this man, right? Like remember that the whole concept of him buying Twitter was someone who made a joke on Twitter, right? Was like, hey, you should buy Twitter. And he was like, hey, great idea. What did he do? He bought Twitter and arguably saved free speech, you know? Look, I'm a bit of an Elon fan, if you can't tell already, but, you know, it is what it is. So let's talk about the Terrafab, all right? Actually, I want to go back to the screen, because no, never mind. Let's just leave it at that. All right, so at first look, it looks like probably the coolest looking, largest semiconductor factory, but it's probably could become one of the most important industrial projects in America in over the last 20 years, if not the world, right? It has everything to do. This involves national security, economic independence, artificial intelligence, robotics, and honestly has a lot of stakes in the future balance of global power. So what is the Terrafab? All right, I'll get some. Let me get through this introduction, then we'll get through the questions and stuff, because I at least want to discuss it, kind of like for people who don't necessarily know. So SpaceX and Tesla both announced a $16.8 billion semiconductor factory complex in Texas. All right, so explain that this isn't just another factory, it's infrastructure. So if you guys heard the Terrafab, because I just saw that it came out yesterday. Then obviously, as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, I definitely got to talk about this. So why do, especially in the modern day, is, for most of the 21st century, right, and a lot of the 20th century, one of the most substances that wars are in countries are fought over and everything is oil, right? So why are semiconductor chips in a way becoming more important than oil, right? Because for most of the 21st century, 20 years ago, a lower part of this century, oil is strategic. But today, computing power is becoming more strategic. Every industry nowadays depends on chips. AI, robots, Tesla, Optimus, drones, military systems, satellites, missiles, medical equipment, power grids, phones, cars, everything, right? The world superpower won't necessarily have the biggest military. That isn't necessarily the case, right? That's not what China's going for. They're trying to win the superpower war by economic means, right? They're trying to become the economic superpower, right? And so a big factor of that is going to be semiconductors, because it's probably which country has the stranglehold on semiconductors and who also has the most computing power, right? Because that's definitely going to be something that is going to be involved in the AI race for the future. So who makes America's chips, right? So mind you, like, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. We're going to talk about globalism, right? And how the world in the late 20th century, leading to the 21st century, was obsessed with globalism, right? And for basically, it's, we build stuff based on efficiency and prices and everything like that, and that meant, like, hey, we build stuff in China, build stuff in Taiwan, or all these other countries where we can find cheap labor in order to make things as cheap as possible, right? But that isn't the only factor into why globalism is no longer our strategy anymore, and why, instead of outsourcing to make things cheaper, we're actually trying to bring back in all production. Like, you might have American companies, but where are these products actually produced? And this is a factor into certain things of what sort of the strategy is going on with. This is definitely within Trump's administration, and we're not the only country also realizing this, that it's better to keep everything inside house. And we'll get into this. So America designs many of the world's best chips, right? NVIDIA, AMD, Apple, Qualcomm, Broadcom, Google, Amazon, Intel, but most are not manufactured here. Like, so if anybody doesn't, there's a company in Taiwan called the TSMC, all right? And TSMC is like, not only does Taiwan create the most uh, semiconductor chips in the world, majority of them, it actually goes through this one company, which is called TSMC. There's a couple other countries that make some chips as well: South Korea, Samsung, SK Hynix, Memory. Japan, they're not like necessarily make that many semiconductors, but they make a lot of the chemicals, specific chemicals that are used into the semiconductors. You have Netherlands and everything like that. So if China, wow, my voice just squeaked. So apparently I'm going through puberty. If China blocked Taiwan tomorrow, right, that would obviously create some issues. So obviously we would have a response, whatever, but it would create some issues, right? Because if they slowed the flow of semiconductors, that would actually have a bit of a effect on the world economy. So how do you think we would take it? How would we respond? How badly would he have to respond, obviously, if Taiwan was blockaded or Taiwan is invaded by China, right? There's a lot going on there, more than just the independence of Taiwan, right? Them having the majority of creating, manufacturing the super semiconductors in the world is a huge deal, right? That's like equivalent to taking over the one country that produced the majority of the oil in the world. Right? If we did that, that would be the most important country, right? So this is where this discussion sort of gets interesting, and this is where we talk about globalization, because for 30 years everybody was optimized for one thing: cost, lowest cost, fastest production, just-in-time manufacturing, and it worked. It did. Like, obviously, brought down the prices of stuff, prices of stuff. But then COVID happened. Ukraine, the Middle East, China, and honestly, the threat of China in Taiwan, right? It sort of made us realize that we are very dependent upon all these other countries, and we then would have to get involved if, people started doing stuff. So, not necessarily people are now asking what's no longer what necessarily a different question. They're not asking no longer what's the cheapest. Instead, what is the safest? What is the safest to where the fact that I no longer have to depend on all these other countries, and as a country we become as self-reliant on our own manufacturing. So if we ever go to conflict or go to war, or some sort of manufacturing is cut off, we are not hurt as badly as a lot of these other countries. And you can see examples of this going on with the Persian Gulf, because we get very little oil from there. So we are not quite as affected. But the other countries like China and other countries that get a good portion of the majority of the oil, I think China gets about 30% of the oil from the Persian Gulf, they are affected, right? So having that level of Taiwan, wow, I cannot fucking speak today. That level of dependence, that makes us being more self-reliant, makes us more powerful, right? It makes us have a freedom to act independently to our best cases and not get drawn into stuff that we don't want to, just because we are locked into some economic manufacturing pipeline that we created in order to have cheaper products. But, yeah, it is what it is. So, all right, so let's get back to the questions. I know that do you need nuclear weapons detonated in space to make Mars' atmosphere habitable? So I've heard the conversations about this, right? So one of the things that I know that the conversation about using nukes is to essentially blow up the polar ice caps, which is to release the water and a number. Look, I'm not going to speak probably intelligibly on this. I just know that it's to basically combination of, I think, rewarming, some sort of multitude of effects that could make the planet habitable again. And I know that using nuclear weapons to blow up the polar ice caps was a part of it. I don't know the exact science behind it. I'm sure that we can find a video about it, but it is what it is. Maybe we'll go there. Yeah. Look, yeah, if anybody has known anything for the longest time, it's that you look at, like, what was the reason that we got lied into the Iraq war, which was because of companies who definitely were supporting everything between Dick Cheney and a lot of other companies who definitely profited off the war. Like, how many pharmaceutical companies profited off of COVID, right? It is what it is, right? There's a lot of things that happen, and they definitely get pushed by companies, right? It is avoidable. Like, it's not some. I don't believe it's necessarily some conspiracy that we can't necessarily avoid it, but these things definitely do happen, and they are definitely influenced, right? I actually don't know what graphene chips are. If you could explain that, that would be great. I heard that AI cracks some Bitcoin wallets now. It wouldn't surprise me. All right. The nastiest combination is going to be quantum computing and general artificial intelligence. Those are two pinnacle technology that are racing towards. Absolutely. Look, between quantum physics and quantum computing, and just the general artificial intelligence race, right? Because it is a bit of it's like an arms race, but for AI. And whoever's leading this fight, and it's going. Look, AI has been able to multiply a lot of efforts, right? So, for example, you take somebody with AI, you can have a single human being who can now essentially do the work of five different people in certain industries, right? With AI, you can make him one person be able to do essentially the work of a number of different people, right? You're still going to need humans to because AI is not perfect, right? And it obviously is getting better every single day, but you're going to need humans, and obviously certain industries are going to be a little bit more resistant because they require more human beings. Things like doctors and things, but industries like lawyers and even the people who make AI, like the computer programmers, are probably some of the first industries to fall not necessarily completely to AI, but will a lot of the duties and jobs, especially when it comes to paralegals, will be replaced by AI. Probably some of the first jobs in industries to be affected by AI. Mars had an atmosphere. The problem is it doesn't have any magnosphere, which allows solar radiation to steer any atmosphere away. Yeah. We're going to Mars, baby. That's what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. Graphene is one layer of carbon, which chips will make processing much faster. Oh, very cool. I did not know that. So, quantum computing needs special type of math called quantum mathematics, which is not invented yet. Hmm. It's all fascinating. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I actually want to get more into this. Would you get the Elon brain chip if it was a prerequisite to join the space program as an astronaut? To be honest, I would. Look, I'm not the smartest individual, and if I can get some hardware to get a little upgrade, and it was human tested, and I wasn't gonna die immediately, look, I'd be on the forefront of technology. I'd give it a shot. Look, I'm not gonna live forever, so I might as well do some cool shit while we're in here. So if Elon was like, "Hey, I want you for the space program, but I got to put a chip in your head," I was like, "All right, where do I sign?" Cool. Look, that might make me a bit of a pick me girl when it comes to Elon, but I'm okay with it. Elon Musk's Neuralink chip is a mark of a beast in my opinion. Absolutely. Can you imagine, like, just the look? I'm not. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not saying you're not wrong. But best supplements: Viagra, pill pack, TRT, and a brain chip. What else would you need, bro? You've got everything. Like that's the supreme package right there. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years that those are just my only brand deals. Look, I'm for it. You know. So look, this isn't necessarily the end of globalization. It's about strategic independence, right? Like, why are we bringing this ability? Like, why is the Terrafab going to do for American strategic independence and economic resilience? Because one of the issues that we learned was during COVID, right? COVID highlighted a number of issues that globalism, right, while in great theory, like having all our stuff manufactured for cheaper, has a lot of downsides, right? Because when we no longer have access to those places and it's something like a global pandemic, which, limits the way people can travel, it affects goods, right? Having that strategic independence where everything that we need is manufactured within our country, yeah, it might cost a little bit more, but in other things, it will cost less money, especially if it comes during some sort of global pandemic or some level of wars or conflicts that will affect manufacturing and supply. So there's pros and cons of this, like with anything, right? So because there are certain industries where countries no longer want complete dependence on other countries, right? And a lot of those fall under defense, semiconductors, medicine, rare earths, energy, critical minerals. Um, because this isn't about ending global trade, it's about making sure your country can survive if global trade gets disputed. So, and look, and there's I'll give you like a bit of a military perspective. Um, so people love talking about fighter jets, right? wars aren't won by fighter jets. They're won a lot of times by supply chains, and economic, like one of the reasons that we were such a powerhouse in World War II was our manufacturing ability, because nobody could match us. Like even Japan knew. Like Admiral Yamamoto even said, like, we awoke a sleeping giant. And it really came down to they even had then understood our industrial capacity and capabilities, right? Because we had this amazing ability that no other country could even come to close to match, was our ability to pump out weapons, right? Because we could produce much shipbuilding, aircraft production, ammo, and now replace steel with semiconductors, right? The future wars depend on computing, AI, electronic warfare, drone swarms, satellite communications, cyber, and each one of these starts with chips, right? These semiconductor chips. And AI has changed everything. It's Chat GPT, Tesla Optimus, autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles, medical AI, military AI, humanoid robotics. Like everyone requires so enormous amounts of computing. No chips, no AI, right? So that a lot of these things that we're starting to heavily rely on, especially AI, right? And a lot of other programs that are including more capabilities in AI, are relying more on AI. This is becoming more important. And because the chips that feed them are also becoming a resource that's going to become more important than oil eventually, right? Not necessarily the case now. They're both very important, but the importance of semiconductors is rising with our reliance on AI and other types of technologies that use these sort of chips. So, is America, I guess the question is America entering a new industrial revolution? All right. All right. Let me go back. Let me find your CIA question. Adonis, where you at, baby? Did I miss Adonis? Did I miss your question about the CIA? If I did, Adonis, repost the question. All right, let me check. Interesting. Can you guys hear me now? Interesting. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can fix this. It says it's the yo. So is that better? Can you guys hear me better now? Or is it still interesting? I don't know. Just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can fix this. All right. How about now? Does that work? Can you how does this guy sound? Does it sound better? I just raised the mic volume. It was on apparently on auto. Okay. All right. Anyways, let's go back to your question. Okay, so this is a good question, right? Yes, if you I asked if you think the CIA is a good entity or is it corrupt and problematic. Um, you may hate the answer to this question. The answer is yes, right? And I say that, right? Because the CIA does serve good purposes. It does do some good things. But is it a amalgamation of something that is kind of heading towards um is it is an organization that has been collecting power, right? Not necessarily collecting capabilities and getting to the point where it it does things. It definitely, look, the motto of the CIA is it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, right? And the thing is when the CIA does something that the government doesn't necessarily want it to do, not everybody in the government has the balls to tell the CIA no. Like, bad. Stop that, right? And so that's one of the reasons that the CIA, for example, all right, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, right? So the capabilities, originally the CIA just did human, right? And the NSA did SIGINT, right? But like a lot of the intelligence community and a lot of the special operations units, especially in the tier 1 levels, we have developed this strategy where instead of keeping all the capabilities divided within these organizations, everybody starts to grow them organically. And the CIA was one of the first ones to do that. And what they started doing was incorporating abilities and skills and technology from the NSA, and they created the Directorate of Science Technology in the CIA. And that is essentially, for basically does what the CIA does, just on a bit of a smaller scale. But they have that capability. They have tactical capability with Ground Branch. Uh, there's a lot that the CIA doesn't. The CIA has a lot of capabilities, but the thing that the CIA has over the special operations community is more authorities. There's a reason why the kill list is done by the CIA. It's not done by Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 because they don't have the authorities to. And not necessarily do does the CIA have the authorities in that situation, because they do have a lot of authorities, but they are sort of given a little free, what's the best way to put it? Not necessarily carte blanche, but a level of like, hey, do this, and we're not going to come down to you just because it also may be illegal, technically, right? I don't know the exact legal standpoint of it, but it is definitely something. Is the CIA getting to a point where it probably needs to be controlled and probably brought back in? Probably, right? And look, and I'll give you a bit of a history. So, and I've talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to get more into this, right? Here's a great example. Let's talk about the ISA in the 80s, all right? The ISA today versus the ISA from about 1981 to 1988 was a very different organization. So when the unit was created, it was the bridge between the CIA and Delta Force, right? They had the capabilities of both. They had essentially the tactical, same level tactical, but they also sort of had the same leeway and authorities that the CIA did. And what ended up happening, and a lot of people may not know this, is the ISA was running around assassinating a whole bunch of people, right? They were basically commandos running around the world doing whatever the F they wanted, because they fell within this kind of gray area where nobody was really giving any oversight. And also, a lot of people may not know this, at the time, so Delta, SEAL Team 6, all the Tier 1 units, all the operators are enlisted, right? But they are still led by officers from sort of an administrative standpoint of view. The ISA at the time in the 80s had no officers. It was just operators, right? So combined with the fact that they really had not set the rules for this organization, they went amok, right? And as an example of how bad that they were, so like just off, like this random unit that just was doing whatever it wanted for years. When the CIA and Delta Force are both complaining to the government and to Congress that, like, hey, you have a rogue unit that really need to be reamed in, you know that they're doing some crazy shit, right? And that's what the ISA was doing in the 80s. So eventually, they were like, a couple things happened. They got outed in the media in the late 80s, and also Congress came down and deemed that ISA, not only it needed to kind of rein in its authorities, that it couldn't just go around the world and taking a little bit of Delta, taking a little bit of CIA and just do whatever they want, that they needed to give them rules, right? So that's when they sort of got reamed in, kind of brought in to have a specific role, which is to be the Army's version of the CIA, right? But limit their ability to assassinate it tactically, right? Their tactical role was limited to a certain extent, right? Because before they were basically like Delta Force type guys with CIA authorities, or lack of, even more of the authorities than the CIA. The CIA was complaining that they had too much leeway, right? And then they instilled the fact that they needed officers, because apparently they need adults, right? That's sort of how it was phrased, right? The ISA needed adults. Okay, so mind you, that's the example, right? So it's not unheard of in the American government for an organization to get too much power with not enough oversight and supervision, and then just go amok and do whatever they wanted, right? That was literally the ISA in the 80s, right? So bad that the Delta Force and CIA were both complaining that this group needed to be reamed in, which they eventually did. So that being a bit of a tangent, going back to the CIA was what's the best way to explain this? Okay, for somebody, right, when you're in the ISA, you work with every intelligence agency, right? So NSA does not have ground guys, right? Like the CIA has ground branch, but the NSA doesn't have an equivalent. So what does NSA use? I'll be honest, NSA's ground element is ISA, right? The SIGINT operators at ISA are their ground guys, right? Because they don't have a ground branch equivalent. Give me a second. I think I lost my point for a second. Oh. So when you're in ISA, you work with all these different agencies, right? We're like ISA's ground guys, but we also work with the CIA, right? Because anytime you've ever operated in another country, everybody knows the keys to the kingdom. In order to have permission to be in that country, even as a military authorities or a military operation, you still have to go get permission from the chief of station, right? Anybody who doesn't know, basically every country is not run by the American affairs are not run by an American ambassador. They're run by the chief of station. The chief of station, look, here, the easiest way to explain this is using the British government. The chief of station is the prime minister, and the ambassador is the queen/king of England, right? The ambassador is a political figurehead. The prime minister is the one who actually makes decisions. And typically, in most countries, the chief of station runs things and the ambassador does not, right? So you have to go get permission from the chief of station. So even being sort of the ground troops for NSA, we worked with the CIA more than we worked with the NSA, because we had more in line with what the CIA was doing. Plus, they were doing SIGINT. So why necessarily? We didn't always have to go to the NSA or you have to be the SIGINT guys, because we had all these capabilities within the CIA that sometimes we didn't even need to go to the NSA. And that's crazy when you think about it, right? That they have developed so much capabilities organically. And the fact that presidents are afraid to discipline them. You know, it's a bit of, I've seen a bit of, even in my time, I've seen them having too much power, right? Too much capabilities, right? And look, an organization, the reason why we don't have this conversation about Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, ISA, is because their command respects the chain of command. the directors of the CIA historically have not necessarily done that, right? Because their chain of command, technically, is the DNI and then to the president. And historically, the CIA has not been the best soldier in that particular issue, right? If that makes sense. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but that is my take on precisely. I was listening this afternoon in Andy Steff's podcast with John Carricker. Probably said there's some points about how CIA, government, etc., is certainly out of control and no accountability. Right? Look, and that's really what it comes down to. You can grow capabilities, right? And these are amazing capabilities. But what's the point if you can't fucking control it? You have to be able to control it. And the tier 1 units, they're controlled, right? The CIA, right? It had its capabilities, right? But it's growing its capabilities, right? So we've had issues with CIA for years. But the fact that it's growing its capabilities means it's only going to become more of a problem. Is the capabilities of CIA an asset? Absolutely. But you don't need some rogue intelligence agency who doesn't fucking fall in line and step, right? You have to be some level of accountability, right? Look, I'm all for capability, right? But I have seen with my own 2 eyes, what no adult supervision in the intelligence and special operations community looks like. And while it sounds great in theory, some of these people who do this stuff should not be the ones making decisions, right? Because a lot of it's really self-serving and self-centered, and not everybody's necessarily looking at the big picture, right? Because you may be looking at something tactically or something that concerns the particular mission on it, but does it serve the overall strategic purpose of that area, right? And these are questions that you have to ask on a macro level, not necessarily a micro level, right? And so that's the point of having a DNI, right? To be the macro decision maker for these intelligence agencies. Does the unit still conduct tradecraft, or is that more of ISA CQB is cool, but being a ninja is cooler? I'm assuming we're talking about Delta Force. Does Delta Force conduct tradecraft? Yes, they do. What op outed them? Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly. I don't know necessarily if it was one single op. I think it was actually a collection of things, but it was really interesting. Like if you go back to the history, and also because of this, even though the CIA, so remember ISA was created because we had a bad relationship with the CIA, but they got so out of hand, going around the world just being commandos and assassinating people out the world, just basically doing shit that Delta Force didn't even have the authorities to do, that both the CIA and Delta Force both combined were like, hey, bro, you need to stop. And like basically approached Congress, but like, hey, and we're complaining. They were like, hey, bro, you need to slow, fucking pump the brakes, bro. So they were having too much fun and people got jealous. Definitely in a way, right? Look, I'm not gonna lie. Would have been awesome to been in ISA in the 80s. Fuck yeah. Bro, like that's the fucking dream. Like what everybody thinks of Black Ops, what ISA was in the 80s would have been the fucking dream. I mean, unlimited budget, no fucking oversight, no officers. Brother. Gonna go wherever you want, do whatever you want, get all the money. Bro. That shit would have been cool. But I think for the better, that shit ended. Right? Hey, Lay Diamond Dog. What's up? Good to see you, brother. Interesting. Hey, Charlie Finley. What's up, brother? From Berlin. How's the weather over there? 440 joules. Uncle Alert. Thank you, Bob Filtration. Appreciate you, brother. There have been 6 presidents repeating me in running cover. Yeah. Look, I'm not saying I appreciate that. Look, okay. Ty got bored. Does the CIA do some stuff? Yes, they do. But let's be very cautious of thinking that the CIA attacked the DNI's husband. All right. The man has a legitimate disease and murdering people with cancer. Look, I operated with the CIA for years, right? Would it be, for the sake of our enemies, would it be sort of a cool thing if they could kill people with cancer, right? I can tell you from firsthand experience, they cannot kill people with cancer, right? Can they poison people? Absolutely. Uh, but the type of cancer that Tulsi Gabbard's husband has, I can tell you the CIA does not have the capability to give them that type of cancer. They don't have it. Trust me. They can do a lot of things that they cannot do. So let's always be cautious, right? Of let's not. I'm not going to name the specific YouTuber, right? But let's keep the tinfoil hat, right? And let's just because something is odd doesn't necessarily mean it's a conspiracy, right? But at the same time, is there a possibility things are conspiracies? Absolutely. But most things, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? We should not believe everything the government says, but we shouldn't believe every single conspiracy theory, right? There's usually some kernel of truth in every level of conspiracy theory, right? Is it to the level that someone states it is? Not necessarily, right? Have been conspiracy theorists been correct in the past? Absolutely, which is another reason why you should listen to them. But it doesn't mean everything is a conspiracy theory, if that makes sense. Does ISA or Delta the closest thing to Batman, essentially? Look, ISA in the 80s might have been the closest thing to Batman, but I don't necessarily think that. All right, we're good on temperature. Israel has not decided to blow up my camera yet. Um, Kirikow seems to be a damage control for mass murder of Americans assisted testing. Look, I could tell you from firsthand experience, the CIA, nothing that John Kirikow says does the CIA sanction, right? If there's anybody who does not give a fuck about what the CIA cares, thinks, or does, it's John Kirikow. Because he's been one of the biggest advocates out there. So not only did the CIA fuck him over, right? But he's actually been one of the biggest advocates for limiting the CIA's capabilities and power. So if that's what you're insinuating in this comment, I could be reading it wrong because I'm an idiot, but he's definitely not a shill for the CIA. Was ISA in the movie Argo with Ben Affleck? No, because ISA was just being created at the point of Argo. Or actually, did Argo technically happen? I actually think it happened before the Iran hostage or the Operation Eagle Claw, right? Because remember, Operation ISA didn't start the initial creation process until the failure of Operation Eagle Claw, and I think Argo happened prior to that. But no, it was all CIA, right? But this was an example because we actually had, and they don't really talk about this in the movie, but there were actually multiple CIA sources and operatives in Iran at the time. And when the first mission failed, right, they wanted to plan a second mission, a second hostage rescue. And the second mission definitely heavily relied upon the the cooperation with the CIA, and the CIA refused because one, they saw how badly the first one went, and they're like, we don't want to compromise sources, right? Like if you're standing in the CIA's shoes, I get it, right? Like I can understand where they're coming from. Do I agree with it? Not maybe not. It doesn't matter. But This was the reason that they decided to, hey, military's like, you don't want to help us. We want to do this. We're going to create your capabilities within the DoD, right? And that's why ISA then got created. Uh, das Wetter is scheiße in Berlin. The weather is shit in Berlin right now. I look, I can translate a little bit. CIA had a heart attack gun in the past. Look, see, heart attacks, that's one thing. You can actually induce heart attacks. This I actually know. But inducing cancer, and what type of cancer did Tulsi Gabbard have? Tulsi Gabbard. His illness. What was his illness? He had a rare form of malignant bone cancer, right? Yeah, the CIA does not have the capability to give someone bone cancer, right? I don't know the CIA who attacked DNA says, but I do know that somebody kills people in ways that blame it on cancer. Look, cancer, if you want to kill somebody, right? I'll be honest, the CIA doesn't really necessarily like, if the CIA wants to kill somebody, they're not the biggest fans of something that takes years, right? Look, I'm not going to put it past them, but typically when there's a problem, they want to get rid of it sooner rather than later. And that's where Ground Branch comes in. Right. So, because there's a reason for this, right? Imagine you are within the organization, the CIA, right? You have directors, the CIA, the assistant directors, you have different station chiefs. Remember, like all government positions, right? These are not permanent, right? You're not the chief of station for 20 years. You're not the director of the CIA for 20 years. So, to people, generally, when you are in these positions of power within these organizations that have operational capabilities, you don't want to put in a plan to conduct an operation to go after somebody who's been on your target list. That's not going to go through until you're out of that position, right? Look, it's human nature, right? You want to be selfish. You want to kill people on your watch. And so that's another reason why these slow killing, like I give someone cancer, is not, is there, you can give people diseases and it might lead to that. Yeah. But like it's not necessarily something that like this capability that people necessarily think that they have, right? Are there things that are in research and development, things like that may be experimenting with? Absolutely, they definitely do that. But um, I think sometimes people give them way too much credit, and then once you actually get inside these organizations, you will actually be really disappointed with how not like Hollywood people think these units are, right? Remember, these are normal human beings who are in these organizations, normal human beings that run these organizations, and they're not necessarily the most efficiently run organizations. Like even like someone like Delta Force, right? Most people have an idea of how efficiently it's run. It's run very efficiently, but not as efficiently run as you think it is, right? They deal with their own issues. Um, you guys are fucking ridiculous. Right? Tony Mendez was the main character of Argo, if I remember correctly. Have you read the Charlie Beckwith book? It's good. Yes, actually, um, that's the mission. No, I'm thinking of the no. The inside. It was it Inside Delta Force. It was actually one of the first books I read. Right. Um, Obviously, it was a good book. My favorite Delta Force book technically is Pete Blaber's book, The Mission, the Men in Me, just because I like how he takes all his book is about life lessons, right? It was just kind of like similar to what I like the format that I want to do with as far as the channel is make everything about life lessons and then tie stuff that you did within that into it, right? Like that's kind of like the thing that I like about the mission, the men in me, and Pete Blaber's book. And but Charlie Beckwith's book is good, right? It definitely has a good history of not only the trials and tribulations that led him to the creation of the CIA, but also a lot of the bullshit that was going on. Because even when the CIA was, or the Delta Force was created, there was, what is it, Blue Light or whatever, the rival organization that was being created by some like former Ranger dude. I might be getting this wrong, but it was something like that, right? And then eventually they won out, and luckily, and then a great thing, right? That one of the first operations, one of the biggest failures in military history, Operation Eagle Claw, instead of crying about it, being little bitches, they decided to take their failures and then use it to create the greatest special operations organizations the world has ever seen. JSOC, ISA, SEAL Team 6, the awesomeness that Delta Force has turned into, RRC, the 24th STS, the 160th, all created because of one of our greatest failures. And I think that's awesome. I think that's a great analogy. You can draw parallels to life. A conspiracy. I actually really like this. We're going to start the shit out of this. All right. A conspiracy theory equals when people simultaneously overestimate and underestimate the power and the stupidity of the government. That could not be more true. One of the things that I have experienced is not only, and you can go back to the conversation about the CIA about this, the level of power that the CIA has. And you would think that the people that work at the CIA are these like super competent, super intelligent people, and some of them are, right? But even the ones that are competent and intelligent, some of them are some of them have stupid fucking, like, some levels of stupidity, right? And I would be surprised, like, for example, when I started working with the agency, I thought, like a lot of people, I was surprised to find out what case officers were like, right? A lot of people think case officers, like if you're thinking like James Bond or something like that, or if you're even thinking like someone like John Kirikow is actually I think he's a very intelligent, very smart person, right? Most of the case officers that I met were fucking goobers, right? And there's a reason why, why they don't, like when they go out on missions, there's a reason why GRS has to escort them, because these dudes, they look like the dudes you would have made fun of in high school and college for being fucking nerds, right? Look, I'm not condoning bullying, right? But that's what I'm saying. So there's a reason, like, these dudes were not expected to defend themselves, and that GRS has a job is because the CIA, a lot of the CIA, not all of them, a lot of the CIA case officers are some fucking goobers. If that makes any fucking sense. There have been a dozen people that this has happened to. They die within a few months. They tried to do it with me, but I survived. All right, well, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to get into that. Yep, blue light. That's what it was. Yep. So yeah, it's really interesting because it's like you see some of the like toxicity within the military and the government and the acquisition process, and these officers and these generals who decide which of these units were getting created. Luckily, Charlie Beck was able to succeed because the guy, I forget the name of the guy who was trying to create blue light, he definitely had a different idea of what the organization would have been. And I actually think that we would have been worse for the wear if he would have succeeded and not Charlie Beckwith. There you go. What you mean is dorks. You're just being polite. Yes. When you think of fucking giant ass fucking dorks, right? Who you would not trust with a fucking gun, that's what most of the CIA case officers. Obviously, I expected. Look, I didn't expect James Bond, but I expected something along the lines, somewhere, something closer to that, right? Um, but I was surprised. They were nowhere near that, and I now understand why GRS has a fucking job. Right. And to be honest, Ground Branch is too highly trained to deal with that fucking job. Right? There's a reason why GRS exists and Ground Branch does not deal with the case officers. Not typically. Yes. Look, so here's also the other thing. People are like, well, the government controls us. Okay. Here's the reason why that's not really true, right? Because it would require some level of competency and planning for them to actually do shit on purpose, right? Do they fuck up shit and fuck up people's lives? Yes, but they usually do it by accident because of incompetence, right? Like people who are like, oh, the government's doing this because they planned this, right? No, bro, you've obviously never worked in the government. That shit doesn't happen because nobody has that level of planning. Nobody has that level of not coercion, coordination, right? You would be extremely surprised at the highest levels of special operations in the intelligence community how incompetent they can be sometimes, right? Look, in the CIA, as an example, will literally do shit to fuck over other organizations within the U.S. intelligence service and the military just because they're like, fuck you, I don't like you, right? People are fucking petty. They do this, right? That there's some, so this concept that there's some this coordinated effort on the mass scale to fuck over people's lives, like extremely well coordinated. I have my doubts because I've seen the level of stupidity in the government at the highest levels, and it's crazy. It's fucking nuts, dude. Yes. I love this. All right. We actually used to make a joke whenever we met CIA case officers, we would be like, that as a requirement, that it was obvious that you had to be a virgin to be a case officer of the CIA. Like that's how big of fucking dorks these dudes were. Uh, Liberty Risk podcast hosted by SEALs talk about that they are the only unit flexible enough to change tactics quickly. Hate their arrogance. Well, so you guys are gonna like this. So my video that's coming out tomorrow is about the SEALs and SEAL culture, right? And I'm reacting to two clips. One is of Sean Ryan talking about how he's ashamed to call himself a Navy SEAL sometimes, and about Andy Stump saying that he's distancing himself from the SEAL community, right? So I take clips from two of their podcasts where they talk about this topic, and I react to it, right? And look, and this is not a SEAL bashing video, right? Are the SEALs probably guilty of the this particular issue the most? Yes, which is a lack of accountability and bad leadership. But it is a lesson, right? Like most of my videos, there's an overarching positive lesson, right? When what positive leadership looks like, what the absence of toxic leadership looks like. And so that's my video that's coming out tomorrow. So some people might see it as a SEAL bashing video, but it's not. It's meant to be a video that helps people to understand that even elite units can go down the wrong path, and culture is a big thing. And we can change that. We can change SEAL culture for the better. And it's an example for everybody. It's an example for the Rangers, an example for the Green Berets, Delta Force, every organization, and also private companies, right? What bad leadership looks like, what a toxic culture can do to an organization that was held so highly. Um, um, yeah, Andrew Bustamante has been double speaking at me as well, and he's a fool with daddy issues. CIA or PP Toms, not James Bond. James Bond is a contractor. Look, and for I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Um, Bustamante, from what I understand of John Kirikow, that he wasn't even a case officer; he was an analyst. Um, and he may have become a case officer at the end of his career, but I know for his majority of his career, he was an analyst and not a case officer. I believe that was what's true. Check out VFT if you want to see a legit Bustamante impression. We'll definitely have to look that. Look, hey Rack Shadow, see if you can find a clip of VFT. I'll put it up here if you find it. So Bustamante, I like that. Right, that Fraggle Rock hair. He cut it. I saw that he cut it. So, is ground branch POMOs. Look, you guys keep sometimes I forget these acronyms. Paramilitary operations officer. Yes. So if you want to apply essentially ground branch, the way to go there for the application process is the paramilitary operations officer. Yes. So that's what I thought that was, but I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't responding to the wrong acronym, if you will. So JV Seals, bunch of Bud boys, angry at that one. Yeah, I knew that was going to anger them. But look, I'm going to tell you, be honest. At Delta, ISA, and even at DevGru, they refer to them as the JV SEALs, right? Other the tier one Navy SEALs refer to the normal ones as JV SEALs. I didn't come up with this term on my own, right? They came up with it. I don't know if SEAL 26 came up with it, but I've definitely heard DevGru guys refer to them as the JV bros, the vanilla boys, all sorts of things. Should should DevGru be disbanded and just expand Delta's mandate? No, no, actually, I don't. I think that DevGru has a lot of capabilities, right? And look, majority of DevGru guys are fucking amazing, right? But there are a few bad apples, absolutely. But and I talk about this in the video, and actually Mike Ritland talks about this. Well, actually, a bunch of them do, right? Actually, they all kind of like is the reason why this is a larger issue within the Navy SEALs is because the Navy SEALs do one thing worse than everybody else does, and that's policing their own dudes, right? In the rate, look, for example, right? How many movies have been out about SEALs, right? That had been slight exaggeration stuff, right? Let's look at Tim Kennedy, right? The second that one Green Beret exaggerates something, bro, we're all over him. Like people are shitting on fucking Tim Kennedy, fucking class of that, right? And if anybody's seen the most recent stuff coming about Marcus Luttrell, you'll see that Marcus Luttrell potentially exaggerated more than Tim Kennedy did. And nobody's shitting on him on the level that we did on Tim Kennedy, right? So that's an example of how the Green Berets definitely police their own better, right? And let's go back to one of the biggest issues the Rangers ever had, which was Pat Tillman, right? Which obviously the officers in charge definitely fucked up. And the Rangers, luckily, that got outed pretty quickly. I forget what was the timeline, but I remember really quickly at the time hearing that Pat Tillman got killed, and then very quickly, shortly after, they were like, "Hey, there's actually a crazy issue that they uncovered. There's a cover up, and Pat Tillman actually got killed by friendly fire. There was fratricide, and luckily, both the Rangers and the Green Berets, and I think even a lot of ways Delta Force does a really good job of policing its own, which is why you hear more about this in the SEAL community, right? And I do think that this is so it's overall you have a couple bad apples, but when you have some bad apples, all you got to do is have your dudes who are in it police it, right? And what's that saying? Right? And obviously this is a bit of it being hyperbolic, but the for evil, right? It's not evil, right? But you can draw a parallel to this, right? The saying that for evil to thrive requires the um what's the word I'm looking for? Not indecisiveness. What's when you don't do something, right? Um Not the ignorance. What's the word I'm looking for? I think this quote is also Boondock Saints. Why can I not fucking think of it right now? It is for evil to thrive. Wait, actually, I'm gonna look it up. I know this is a famous quote. It's for good people to do nothing, but there was another word that I was like, um, Yeah, but this is simple, right? But it's like, but for bad eggs to thrive, right? For people who are not good for the unit to thrive, the people who are majority of the people have to do nothing, and I think that's where this is a problem specifically within the SEAL community, if that makes sense. And so the video this weekend that's coming out on Saturday, um, uh, so that's yeah, so that will be my video coming out tomorrow. So I actually just saw the right before I did this live, I just saw the media company sent me the draft for that video, and it looks pretty good. So uh, like at least I didn't see any blaring issues. Yes, I believe he did call him Timo. And what was that other guy? There was that other dude he was making fun of, like the Arab guy who was claiming to be a badass. I forget what his name was, or he was like Italian. I don't know. Um, yeah, yeah. So it just look, I've said this before that SEAL Team Six, from a tactical level, right, from a tactical precision to a shooting, right, how awesome they are and how good they are at essentially doing raids, counterterrorism, doing hits, killing people, right? They are fucking phenomenal, right? SEAL Team 6 can go pound to pound for Delta, right? But as an institution, the overall health of an institution, it is a more mature organization, right? And I got to see both. Look, you guys think that the SEAL community is toxic. I actually think there's one other organization that's more toxic than that, but it is what it is. Chris Kyle is worser than Marcus Luttrell. Joshua George, you talk like I do. I would definitely say that worser. JV seals are much worse than Denver culturally. Then there's a couple different reasons for that. I think that's well, look, I think there's more bad apples, right? Um, I think there's bad apples in every organization where I work. That's a fact of life. Absolutely, that is. There could not be a truer statement than right here, Mister Bob Filtration. You're gonna find bad apples wherever you go. Like I thought that when I got to SF as a SOD A, I thought the world of SF guys. I'd always wanted to be here. It was my goal. But when I got there, look, don't get me wrong. Like SF guys I actually think they're great. I think it's a great organization. I think the Green Berets in general are a great organization. They have a great lineage, everything like that. Um, but I was a little disappointed with what I saw. And then I learned about the tier one organizations, and I'm like, okay, cool. This is where I want to go, right? Especially when I got my medical waiver to go to SFAS turned down for the fourth, like the third fucking time. So, but even when I got to a tier one unit, right? Yeah, was there definitely less bad eggs? Yes, but there were still a few. They still get through the process. It doesn't matter how high you go, how elite organization. You could get to the NFL, the professional everything. You can get the top of your thing. You get to the Olympics and still encounter toxic people. Like you're never going to be completely avoid of that, right? For that is a fact of life, and you are absolutely 100% sure. Chris McCoy is a good, yeah. The whole Pat Tillman thing, and the craziest thing about the Pat Tillman thing is there's probably not the fact that we killed through fratricide, right? Probably one of the greatest fucking Americans ever fucking created. The fact that this man, who is, if you guys don't remember, Pat Tillman wasn't just any fucking football player, right? He was a fucking star. He was like one of the best football players in the fucking NFL. And if you don't know who Pat Tillman is, look this man up, right? You think Chris Hemsworth looks like a fucking man? Pat Tillman makes Chris Hemsworth look like a little bitch, right? Talk about a fucking jaw of the gods, bro. Like Pat Tillman, bro. Like if I could ever, if when I look up what a fucking man looks like, it's fucking Pat Tillman, right? But then this man, not only is he a fucking star of the fucking NFL, right? Like he was fucking top of his game. This man wanted to be a fucking Ranger, right? And what he did, he turned down a fucking multi-million-dollar contract to go join the fucking Rangers. And what did we do? We fucking shot him, right? And then to pay his fucking I don't get cost that much, I don't get fucking honored, but here, and then we have the fucking balls to fucking try to cover it up. The fucking audacity of these motherfuckers, right? And look, those issues that luckily they got outed pretty quickly, and I think the Rangers learned a valuable lesson not to do that bullshit. But that bullshit exists, I think, within the SEAL community. Is definitely more rampant, right? Take Operation Anaconda, take Marcus Luttrell, take it, Chris Kyle, take the whole shit going on with fucking Rob O'Neill and fucking Matt Bissonnette, right? It's a fucking disaster, bro. Right? Like, look at any of these other organizations, right? Like, literally, you look at like the exaggerations that are coming out with all these movies and all these people and all these books. And if you compare them to essentially what Tim Kennedy exaggerated on, right? They're like more exaggerated, but we're shitting on Tim Kennedy way harder. Why? Mainly because the Green Berets definitely hold a higher standard, I think, than the SEALs do, which I think is a good thing for the Green Berets. But bro, let's keep that standard across the fucking board. But going back to Pat Tillman, one of the things I love that everything in Arizona is all about Pat Tillman, right? Like I still to this day, like if you ever watch the interviews of Pat Tillman about going through this process, about how he wanted to leave and his conversations, even his fucking coaches knew that he was the fucking man, right? Bro, one of the greatest Americans ever to fucking live. It just, man, like you could, like fucking level of character on that guy. I'd fucking, we fucking, America definitely lost a fucking great one in that one. Just fucking, that's one of the same, yeah. Oh, indifference. That's the fucking word, right? I think that's the quote from Boondock Saints. I always fucking loved, right? For evil to thrive requires the indifference of good people, right? Obviously, there's different versions of it, but I like that, right? And that's so true. And it isn't necessarily evil. You can apply this to almost anything, right? How does toxic leadership happen? Because of the indifference of fucking good people within organizations, right? So you have to fucking stand up, right? People give people a lot of shit for being whistleblowers, right? Like, for example, I had a conversation earlier today about Edward Snowden, right? And I have seen with my own two eyes, right? I have seen not only intelligence agencies, but special operations organizations that I was a part of, units, teams. Did we do illegal shit? Technically, yes. Or on the spectrum, right? Was I a part of things that maybe shouldn't have been done? Probably, right? But these are I saw the worst case of toxic leadership in a tier 1 unit, right? And like I said, bad eggs get filtered out, but when the few that do get to these high level organizations, for whatever reason, because when they do, there's some fucking worse, right? For whatever reason. And one of the reasons that this man was able to be as toxic, actually he got fired, right? Was because I was actually directly involved in a situation with this particular command sergeant major, the squadron command sergeant major. That one of the reasons that he was able to survive as long as he did before he finally got fired and flagged was because there were so many times where people wouldn't do anything because they were too afraid of risking their own fucking career. Luckily, I don't toot my own horn, but I was not one of those people. I actually fucking stood up and almost got fired in the process. But luckily, he got fired in the process, and I was actually vindicated. right? I know that there's some people like on Instagram, and there's one person in particular who says I got fired from the unit. Well, unfortunately for him, I did not. That squadron command sergeant major got fired instead. And then I got to leave the unit about a year and a half later on my own terms when I decided to go to flight school. And you know who wrote my recommendation letter for my flight packet? The unit CW5, who was an aviation warrant. So sucks to suck, bro. But it is what it is. All right. It gives a fuck. But my point is, don't be toxic. And if you see shit that's wrong, fucking stand up. Do the right thing, right? I can't begin to tell you. I can't begin to tell you that your legacy, your job, whatever you think you're fucking protecting, is not more important than standing up and doing the right thing. Because you're trying to defend something that's going to end anyways, right? The culture and the legacy that you have, that's what lives on. So stand up for it, right? Like one of the best comments that I got in one of these videos, I think it was on my one of the comments in the my podcast with the tier with Brent Tucker, was actually a guy from flight school who came in and was like, "Hey, I knew Joe in flight school, and he was like great fucking stand up dude and helped me through a lot of issues." And really glad that he's doing well and whatever thing. Like that was, I love that comment, right? I try to go through my life trying to do the right thing. I've always tried to. Have I always done the right thing? No. I've definitely failed sometimes. I've definitely made some missteps. I've definitely made some mistakes. But I try. I try to make the right decisions and I try to be a better person. And I try to do things for and I try to be as selfless as possible, right? Because it's, you know, how can you be look, nobody else is going to live your life. So you have to have some level of selfishness, right? At the end of the day, it's your life and only you're the one who will live it, right? But with what level of ability that you can affect other lives, but also putting yourself first in a way, how many other lives can you affect positively? And I think that is a real measure of what we think of selflessness, right? But I digress. Yeah. So if you guys haven't watched the podcast where Annie Sump has on the investigative journalist who goes into this, there's honestly some really good explanations from the investigative journalist because honestly, he's giving Marcus Luttrell a bit of the benefit of the doubt and trying to be. And when he brings the evidence and then actually also the situations of where the actual comms were actually made and the justification of the reasons why they may when they did could make connectivity because they did actually connect communications with the talk, why after they technically got compromised they didn't report they were compromised, right? And there's actually justification within that video of why they just didn't do it because they didn't want to be embarrassed like this previous SEAL team that had been embarrassed by their compromise, right? So yeah. Yes, that's what it is. Azule. Yeah, yeah. He called him Timo something as well. I forget what it was, right? Um, what was I think he had a Timu name for him as well. Um, yeah. What is it? Someone look up what he referred to as Zoli. He had a nickname for Zoli as well. Yeah. Um, yeah, and you guys saw my video from last week where oh no, I no actually no, I had two videos last week. I had the one where it's the reaction to the DJ Shipley video where he talks about mental health with Andy Stumpf. And then so I'm glad that more people are talking about it, right? And look, you may have your whatever your feelings about DJ Shipley, his family issues, deadbeat dad or whatever. At the end of the day, if someone wants to talk positively about mental health, you know, because I think that's definitely an issue. And if he owns his mistakes, which I think in a lot of ways he does, right? But at the end of the day, If they were like, we're talking about mental health and talking about people not committing suicide, and you come into the chat and you're like, well, he's a deadbeat dad, right? And that's your fucking comment, bro. You're missing the fucking point, right? Don't take away somebody's like, someone who's bringing up a good fucking point just because they made a mistake at some other point in their life, right? We do not judge. Look, you can make mistakes, but you fucking own up for it. Like even Joe Rogan said this. He's like, his favorite people are not awesome dudes. They're dudes who fuck up their lives and then fucking crawl back and become something great. Those are his favorite dudes. Those are my favorite dudes because that's what I did. I at one point fucked up my life, right? Like is it am I gonna fuck it up? Is it Taylor or Tyler Kavanaugh? Is it who's the seal? We're friend. We actually talk on Taylor Kavanaugh, right? Taylor Kavanaugh, I think, is a great fucking example of this, right? This dude went to fucking prison, right? And that dude openly talks about how he fucked up his life and he's bringing it back, right? Those are the dudes I love, right? Because look, everything's great when you're succeeding in life. What happens when you fuck up? What happens when you failure? That's what really makes a fucking man in nowadays, right? Are there bad apples in Delta? Yes, there are. Do they get policed better? Are there probably fewer bad apples within that organization? I would definitely say so. They're fewer because that organization does a better job of policing its own. I actually do think they do a very good job, but there are occasional few people who are bad apples, but they do a pretty good job of weeding them out, right? They eventually get them eventually, right? Um, Yeah, so Brent talks about 24th STS guys training with CAG for shooting, train, and debris for people. Yes, just like as so I was the ISA tactical detachment, so I had a similar role to the 24th STS guys, which is to I was embedded with their teams, their troops, their recce teams, everything like that. So I had to train both shooting and free fall with them all the time. We actually trained on them with a lot of different things. I'm hearing shit. So yes, they definitely do, and I was definitely a part of that as well. If any dude, I'm gonna tell you, the best, and how much as I love Delta, bro, the best people in special operations, I'll probably say this hands down, are the Air Force guys. Air Force Special Warfare and Air Force Special Operations is by far the best special. There's I've yet to meet a bat. Look, if there's an exception to bad apples, it's Air Force Special Operations. For some reason, they're just the greatest fucking dudes in the world. And maybe just because there's a part of it where every time you need an Air Force Special Operations guy, shit has went horribly wrong and you're in the shit now and they're your fucking savior. But dude, I've yet to meet I have yet to meet a bad apple in Air Force Special Operations. It's crazy. Uh, yes, yes, I believe that is the direct quote. Yeah, Pat Tillman, bro. Yeah. All right, let's go down this. Did he really? Did Edward Snowden? Did he try out as a Green Beret? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. All right. So anybody who so Edward Snowden did attempt to join U.S. Army forces, enlisting in May of 2004 as an 18 X-ray Special Forces candidate recruit, but his stint ended after 5 months when he broke both legs in a training accident. So he enlisted in May 7th, and he was discharged the 28th of September. Interesting. I did not know that. You learn something new every day. I appreciate you guys. I think this is an interesting. Every country does illegal shit bad. U.S. does best at limiting them. I'll give you an example. So, look, do we have issues in the United States? Absolutely, right? But are we? okay, so here's a draw parallel, right? You have these organizations, right? You got Delta Force, right? One of the reasons why Delta Force is held as being the most mature organization is because it does a really good job of policing its own, right? Do they still have some bad apples? Yes. I would say in the same parallel, the United States is like Delta Force in that way, is that we are probably the country that's better at policing our own than other countries. Like, look what's going on in fucking Europe right now. That shit is crazy. Like the UK, bro. Like, luckily we don't have it as bad as them, and like on Canada, things like that. But we definitely try to police our own. But the one thing that we do really well, from a military standpoint of view, we limit. We are the only military that I have really encountered that goes out of their way to limit civilian casualties. Like when you deal with Israel, they definitely don't really care. We've had a history of this, even going back to World War II. Like I talked about this on, I think, on the last live. Like during World War II, the B-24 is the reason why we were doing daylight bombing, because we wanted to avoid civilian casualties. The British bombers were doing nighttime bombing because they didn't give a fuck, right? And look, I get it, right? The Germans had been bonding and killing civilians indiscriminately during the war for Britain, the air war over London, where they were bombing London. And I get it. They're pissed off. They don't give a fuck, right? But we risked American lives to limit fucking German fucking civilian casualties. We were the only country who was doing it, right? And we sort of kept that, right? Have we obviously had issues where we've occasionally slipped up? Yeah, but we're generally, no country more than us tries to limit civilian casualties. All right, we're still good. We're an hour and a half, and I don't see the temperature light coming on. So apparently, I haven't pissed off Israel, my Israel overlords yet. Too, they weren't to blow up my camera yet. Mm, yeah. Look, people. So you said people disguise toxic behavior with macho ideas that are really just excuses not to be a quality leader. Look, how do you be a good leader, right? It's one of the best ways to be a good leader is to take accountability, not just for your actions, but the actions of your subordinates, right? If they fuck up, that's your fucking fault, right? That's how, if a good leader, like, that's how you take accountability, right? If your guys fuck up, you don't be like, hey, that's just my guys, they fucked up, right? No, take accountability, right? That's almost in all these situations, if you just fucking take accountability and you fuck up, you own it, dude, so much fucking respect, right? Because nobody's fucking perfect. I can't stress this enough. Nobody's perfect. Nobody ever will be. Nobody's not going to make mistakes, right? Look, Delta and the JSOC was created because of probably the greatest modern failure of military history, Operation Eagle Claw, right? You can learn from these failures. So there's so many different parallels you can draw in life. Like I could do this all fucking day. Where would the CSM go after being sacked? Okay, so there is there is a special operations command or organization within Florida, right? And it is very common. There is a let's just say that there is a section in down in Florida where they put all these a lot of the special operations guys who get fired, and that's where this guy went. Yeah, TCAV is awesome. I've had a chance to talk to TCAV, because he went on Brent Tucker's podcast shortly after I did, and apparently Brent Tucker and Taylor Kavanaugh had some kind words about me, and so Taylor reached out to me afterwards, and we've been supporting each other ever since. I think Taylor Kavanaugh, I love his message, right? I think he's one of the most honest dudes that there is, and literally talks about how he. I think there are very few people who really own their shit more than Taylor Kavanaugh does. and just fucking honest dude about fucking writing your life. And it doesn't matter how much you fuck up your life, there's still a fucking chance. And Taylor Kavanaugh is a fucking great fucking example of that. Yeah, I'm assuming we're talking about. Yeah, I'm glad everybody likes some TCAV. So, yeah. So also, let's talk about this whole deadbeat dad thing, right? If you guys remember, another issue prior to the DJ Shipley deadbeat dad, whatever family fucking drama, was what's the dude who's the super David was it David Goggins? I want to say David Goggins. David Goggins, right? It's David Goggins, right? Yeah, David Goggins, right? I remember that was an issue, right? The whole deadbeat dad, and I've thrown a deadbeat dad about so many other dads about being deadbeat dads, right? First of all, what is a deadbeat dad, right? And you know, it is a term, right? Are there deadbeat dads? Yes, there are, right? But I feel like in the modern day, just like the Me Too movement and a lot of like terms like racism and fascism, right? The concept of everybody just calls somebody something just to discredit them. I feel like the deadbeat dad, you know, label is being thrown around so much that it's losing. You're just calling everybody who decided not to be, to divorce their mom or leave their mom and not necessarily be as an active as a person in that particular kid's life, right? If they choose to leave, that's their thing, right? And obviously there's a lot, like for example, there's this one girl who was like famous on TikTok or whatever, and she had she was famous, she went viral because her dad was this like guy who became a professional in his like 30s or 40s, became a professional break dancer. And she went on and was like, let me talk about my deadbeat dad who abandoned us, right? And this man came back with fucking receipts. And he was like, not only do I pay money monthly and I give her mom tons of money, he had photos of him taking them on vacations, right? So look, just because someone calls you, like it's so fucking stupid. But then also, even to the point, like even if they chose not to be in their kid's life, right? People can make that fucking choice. Grow the fuck up. Life goes on. Like, I don't have a dad. My dad died. Right? Right? Is it probably worse because someone's dad chose not to be in their life? Regardless, not in your life. Move the fuck on. Get over it. Right? We live in such a soft fucking society that people are like, oh, my dad left. Like, do you guys never remember? Like, think about this. What is one of the most common things about used to talk about people in the 50s is that their dads used to go out for a carton of cigarettes and never come back, right? Because there was no internet, no cell phone technology. If a guy wanted to start over and he wanted to like start a new family, he could do that. He could leave and start a new family. Nobody was fucking wiser. That was a common thing. And we joke about it all the fucking time, right? Those were, if those weren't deadbeat dads, I don't know what the fuck are. And you know what? That's fucking what they do, right? Whatever. I just don't fucking care, right? Like, do people make the choices? I might, whatever. It's just like at the end of the day, and then where's your fucking proof? How do you prove that someone's a deadbeat dad, right? Am I advocating for men not to take responsibilities for the kids that they birth? No, I'm not saying that, right? But just because someone chooses not to be in their son's life or their kid's life or whatever that is, or their daughter's life, doesn't mean that it um what's the word I'm looking for? That it I'm trying to fucking blank. Let me talk about it. That it doesn't necessarily invalidate anything else that they say, if that makes sense. Yeah. U.S. Air Force Special Reconnaissance is similar to RSC. it is in a way, but RRC does more things, right? So RRC does some do tactical stuff. They do reconnaissance, and they also do um, even some clandestine and covert things, like similar to like on a much smaller scale, kind of like ISAs type stuff, but on a smaller scale. Just kind of like Delta also does some clandestine covert stuff, but it's not their main focus, right? Do you know one's ready? I don't actually know who's one's ready, or is it a group of dudes? Yeah. Look, I am like you look at John Curacao, Edward Snowden, right? Look, we have rules that the NSA is not supposed to spy on Americans, right? There's a rules. You have use at 18. There's a whole multitude of rules against this that the NSA and the CIA are not allowed to spy on Americans, right? And organizations like the CIA and the NSA will get away with shit. Like I said, their motto should be it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. We'll get away with stuff until somebody calls them out on it. And the fact that I believe in whistleblowers, right? Because that helps to keep our government in fucking check. It helps, like, so I support these people, right? And I was talking to somebody today, and they were like, "Oh, I'm surprised that you agree with Edward Snowden." I was like, "Yeah, like, if they're doing fucked up shit, fucking call them the fuck out, right?" It is what it is. Thoughts on the CIA Special Activities Division? I think I've talked about this quite a bit. If you have not been here, Mr. Dumasa, right? They have a similar ability to the Delta, but to the Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, but they have less restrictions and they have more authorities. They get to do more stuff, right? The military still suffers from a lot of bureaucratic red tape, even at the tier 1 level. Like I said, there's a reason why. Is Delta probably a more capable organization? Probably, slightly, right? Um, but they don't have the authorities that Ground Branch does, and there's a reason why they get the kill list and Delta does not. Yeah. Could you share a life lesson? What was the most surprising or strangest thing you had to learn or acquire for the sake of cover, for status of cover action that has helped you later in life? This is I think it's a very good question. And take me a second to think about this, right? And I might, as I'm delivering an answer, like the first answer that comes to my life, my head, my brain, my thought process, I might come up with a different one as our, like, right. So how about I explain some things that I think that you learn while being an alias, right, and going undercover, trying pretending to be somebody else, right? One is learning. So when you're in that type of situation, right, you cannot you are in that status and you are set up on a mission. You are usually by yourself or in very small teams, right? Because if there's more than one of you, it draws attention, right? And then you don't, you might have support but far away, because you can't have support nearby because that also draws attention. So you have to learn how to become extremely self-sufficient, because you have to basically go about yourself that nobody's coming for you, right? And I think this is a great analogy for life. And this is, I say this all the time. Like, one of my favorite quotes is, no one's coming for you. Nobody's going to, do the work to get you that job. Nobody's going to do the work to get you that body that you've always was. Nobody's coming for you. You have to be self-reliant. And look, I'll take it even one step further. And I'm not an atheist, but I personally even for my own motivation or purposes, I even in the religious side of things, I'm open to there possibly being a God and possibly a heaven, but I basically, in my mind, just assume that there isn't, because then I don't have any sort of fuzzy feelings about, hey, God will help me out, right? Because even if there is one, I don't think that he's the type of person that really like helps people in the way that they hope they are. I think, like for example, if God, if there is a God, right, and he was to give you strength, he doesn't give you strength. He gives you difficulties to build strength, right? I feel like if there is one, right, that's how he does things. That would be my guess, right? But I go about myself in my way of life that nobody's coming for me, not even some deity, religious figure, heaven, whatever. I got to do it all myself. So that level of self-reliance is some of the greatest thing that I learned, because before that, most special operations is done as a team. Operating by myself and doing things by myself is one of the most daunting things you'll ever do. But once you start doing it and rely completely on yourself and remember that nobody's coming for you, it's something that empowers you and opens up you to the world. It's kind of a rough transition to go to that, right? Um, so that's probably like the biggest lesson. Strangest thing. I think the thing that I was most surprised about is when you're in Alias for a while, because in order to really believe, to be as effective undercover as being somebody else as an alias, you have to believe the lie, right? You create this lie and then you have to believe it, right? And that's the best way to do it, right? You're kind of like a method actor, if you will. When you come home and you switch documents out and you officially become who you normally are, there's a bit of a transitionary period, because you have been had your mind set that you are this person and this is the life you live. It takes a little bit to go back. And we saw this the most apparent with guys who, because there are certain guys who do missions that are shorter than others, but we had guys who would be an alias for more than 6 months. And you think about it, and they come back for a number of months, that these guys were spending more time as somebody else than they were as who they normally were, right? And if you do this for a couple of years, that fucks with you. And I've seen it cause some issues, and it definitely caused some issues with certain people who had families. So that's definitely a weird thing. I don't think that you would think about until you're in those situations. Um, Oh, so I actually don't have him here with me right now. He's actually with my girlfriend right now. Because he's been spending so much time with me, I decided that she needed to learn, because she's never owned a dog before. She's never had a dog before. So she's spending time with him. But his name is Toro, which is Brazilian slash Portuguese, depending on which way you spell it. But it's both Spanish and Portuguese for bull. And obviously he's a pit bull. He's 7.5 months old. He's a rescue from the Fairfax County shelter here in Virginia. And oh man, we're still good on temperature. This is crazy. And so anybody who doesn't know my dog, I'm eventually gonna have a picture up in here. But Callie was this amazing pit bull who she was highly trained. She was trained off the leash. She could go anywhere with me when we ride horses, or even when I'd practice polo. She'd actually run alongside the horses. Right? She was amazing. She did everything with me. I'm currently training Toro to be an off the leash dog. So it's actually going pretty well. We're already doing off the leash walks, and we're going to start doing, wow, that was weird, off the leash runs. Um, any recommendations for fitness programs for someone who is about to begin a career in policing? Policing. Policing. Apparently, I can't fucking read. Policing, right? Well, I think just in general, it's you're gonna fall. You just want to look. You're. I talk about this in my fitness videos, right? I think of it as like, I guess, the 5 pillars of fitness, and let's see if I can remember this. Right? You have strength, right? Which is, can you move heavy weight? Speed, can you move fast, right? Can you sprint, right? Endurance, right? Can you do that strength or that speed thing for a long period of time, right? Mobility, which is number 4, right? Do calisthenics. Like, what's the point of being a big fucking strong dude if you can't even wipe your own fucking ass, right? And then last one is aesthetics. I think, what's the point of doing anything if you don't look good, right? Rule number 1 is the rule of cool. If you're not looking cool, then what are we even doing with our lives, brothers? You know what I'm saying? Like, gotta look cool, right? So work out to look cool, but also at the same time, get some functionality right there. So I train strength. That's why, I do calisthenics. I'm in the process of teaching myself how to do free handstanding push-ups where I can walk on the hands and do a handstand push-up. I'm still not. I can't do more than 3 handstand walks with just right. I'm getting there, right? Muscle ups, sprint workouts, endurance workouts, right? Mobility is definitely very important as you get older, but really, you combine all those things, and those are, you want to be sort of like, for whatever term you want to fucking use, like full spectrum athlete, right? That's the key, right? So because you're going to, one, as a if you're a police officer, you're going to be carrying a lot of shit. You're going to be wearing bulletproof vest. You have a lot of gear. So one, you need to move with weight, right? You're maybe chasing people down, probably, right? You need to know how to fight, right? If you don't already know how, boxing and jujitsu, right? If you want to throw some kickboxing in there too, learn how to kick, but at the very minimum, boxing, jujitsu, right? Know how to stand up and fight with people. Like, the reason why I feel like boxing, in a lot of ways, it teaches you more about life than almost like kickboxing, right? Don't come at me, because Muay Thai is a more effective, damaging martial art, right? There's a reason why it's part of MMA. But the footwork in boxing is not taught in any other discipline as well as it is in boxing. Like, in boxing, you can literally defend yourself by having such good movement that nobody will ever touch you, like Muhammad Ali shit. So that's one of the reasons why I think boxing is great, because you learn fucking footwork, and footwork is phenomenal, right? Muay Thai is literally just stand there and just beat the shit out of each other, right? Who can take the most damage, right? And I get it. Like, there's a time and place for that. But learn jujitsu or some sort of wrestling, right? Some sort of groundwork, because most fights end up on the ground. And don't be that dude who can fucking box, but you're immediately taken out as soon as you fucking hit the ground. Like, so that's a long-winded answer, but lift weights, right? If you're not doing resistance training, yeah. So this is a great question, and literally I got asked this morning by my girlfriend, right? Because we were on the topic of, because I was telling her about the video that was coming out tomorrow, and she asked this very same question: how does selection not weed out bad apples? All right, so I'll actually give you a great example of why this is, right? So I've talked about this before. Delta Force and ISA in your typical tier 1 selection, but specifically ISA and Delta, it's almost completely solo, right? So other than you interacting with your extremely stoic cadre, right, who do not really interact with you, right? They give you instructions like once and they're done, right? Like, you don't really have, for 5 weeks, you don't really have any human interaction. So if you have zero human interaction, a lot of these characteristics that you would think of as bad apples require them to see you interacting with other human beings, but you don't interact with other human beings. If you can be a completely self-sufficient person and do all this crazy shit that's in selection, but then be a fucking tool bag to other fucking people, you're not going to find out in selection. Like, it's actually very hard, right? But selection's not designed to figure that out, right? OTC does a better job of that, because then you are now in more of a team environment. But it's not perfect. They still get through. But when they do, right, they still do. They weed out more than other organizations do. both ISA, Delta, SEAL Team 6, like the higher you go up, the less there are, but they still exist. Um, yeah, there's a lot of crazy shit here. Yeah, I think it just takes away from, like, if you come in, you're like, hey, like DJ's like, we're talking about mental health. How do we get people? And you're like, well, like literally, I saw a comment this morning on one of my on the video on the DJ Shipley reaction video. Someone's like, well, it's going to be a weird conversation when his son grows up. I was like, what the fuck are the point of this fucking comment, right? You're just like, people just stupid. It's look, one of my favorite quotes, and I try to embody this: never argue with stupid people. They'll bring you down to their level and then beat you with their experience. I love that quote. I forget who said it. I'm sure if we type it in, you can figure out who said it. But I love that quote. So that's why I don't fuck with stupid people or stupid comments, right? So, um, if you want to do recon, watch Valhalla TMZ. I like that. Valhalla TMZ. He does all the work for you. Um, oh, okay. That's right. I have heard about this. So these are the Air Force guys. Oh, very cool. I'll definitely have to check that out. One's ready. Okay. Um, oh man. Look, now you get, like, this doesn't surprise me that fucking you get a bunch of fucking Air Force special operations guys and there's fucking legit. Please tell me you rolled on target listening to High on Fire, Baghdad. You were in the Green Berets. Look, I'll be honest. You'd be surprised. Um, I was not on a team that listened to music before they hit. They took shit way too seriously. I have heard of other teams that listen to music before hits, but when I was in SF, I was on a team that did not listen to music before hits. Which is, are you a Christian? So I grew up Roman Catholic. Um, I consider myself agnostic. All right. I'm open to the concept of faith and there being a God, but I don't really put too much, I don't put too much stock in the institutions of religion, right? I'm definitely open for faith. I just, from an own a self-reliant point of view, I don't rely on, I don't, I don't rely on religion and God to see me through the day. I put all that onus on me. That might be dark for some people, and that might be kind of a heavy, like, realization or a mindset, but it works for me. It makes me work that much harder because I know no one's coming for me. And that's something you hear me say quite a bit. No one's coming for you because I truly believe that. You got to do everything yourself. What if I got no girlfriend or kids? Would a single guy be good for most of these covert jobs? And is it prioritized or something that they look at even recruit guys to be covert? So I'll be honest, the military doesn't really, if you have kids or a wife, it's not really a factor, right? Because look, at the end of the day, if you join these organizations, you're putting your priorities of the mission and the unit before your kids anyways, and they know this, so that's why I don't care, right? Because they're going to be put first anyways. Will it wreck some relationships? Yes, but there are successful relationships in tier one. I've seen successful marriages with kids, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into this. A lot of it is setting expectations, right? If you're like, hey babe, but then also if you're like, hey, I'm going to do this crazy job which has this crazy op tempo, usually you need to not only to set the expectations, you need to give a timeline. Because if you're like, most mother who's not is not going to want to be in a relationship with an absentee father because of a mission for 20 years, right? You're probably going to be like, hey, I'll do 3 to 5 years and then we'll go, right? That's doable. Would you do any other content on YouTube? shooting, camping, traveling, nylon gear, breakdown. Look, there's enough shooters out there, right? You got like fucking, you got the Dev Crew guys, you got Andy Sump, you got Brent Tucker, who are, SEAL Team Six, Delta. They're better shooters than I am, right? Right. I could do some shooting, but I'm not the best in the world. And plus, to be honest, it's not even really my fucking passion. I could do other stuff, but actually, what I want to do, I'm a giant fucking nerd. And I know that people have asked if one, I like fucking Warhammer and painting models, playing Warhammer 40K. Um, I also like fucking video games. And I know that some people were like, "Hey, do you want to do video games?" That might be something I do as well. But traveling, yes, traveling is also something I want to do because I love to fucking travel, right? And I definitely go off the beaten path. I'll stay at hostels. We definitely might do some of that, and yeah. So best site for CQB. I'm building another rifle. Want it to be. A lot of it is personal preference. This has always been personal preference. For example, um, I used what is that fucking site? It's the EOTech with the flip over magnification, right? A simple EOTech just goes a long way, right? There's like the shortened versions, everything like that. There is, I also look. There's a couple setups. Like you can do a variable scope, like a Voodoo, but then I also like having a instead of on top of the Voodoo, the variable scopes. I do like the canted angle sights, like on the side. I prefer if I'm going to use a variable scope. I personally like to cant the weapon for the reflex sight on the side. That's just personally me. It's a lot of it's just when you go to these units, most of these it's all personal preference, and then the type of weapons and then ammos they use is all dependent on what the mission is. What is the job? Like what are we doing, right? So like weapons are tools. Like your kit is a tool, right? You customize your tool and your kit for each mission, and each one is different. Yeah, pit bulls are probably the most underrated dogs. I grew up with huskies and I always thought I was going to get huskies, but then I went to a shelter 12 years ago. I ended up with Callie, and I'm a pit bull guy ever since. Yes, I would tell anybody, look, if you're going to get any weapon, I think your pistol, your rifle, your shotgun, especially anything with tone defense, your flashlight. I'm telling you how valuable a flashlight is because one, you want to see your target, and then two, it is extremely hard. And we've done testing of this. When you put a flashlight in somebody's face, one, they not only do they not really see you, they have to guess where you are, and the percentage of return fire of people missing was drastically increased when you hit them with a flashlight, and also it actually shortened the response time. Flashlights are fucking invaluable, and one of the easiest fucking tools is just slap on your fucking weapon. If you don't have a fucking light on, I would honestly, for home defense, on your AR, have a light on everything, on your AR, on your pistol, also have a pocket flashlight. They're just so fucking invaluable. 100% rule of cool, right? Learn this in SF. I think this was a Ranger quote, but always know where you're going and always look cool. And if you don't know where you're going, just look cool. It's that simple, right? Did I just go back up? Yeah. So yeah. So there's a couple reasons why the CIA keeps getting involved in drug trades, right? There's a couple reasons for this, right? Some of them are actually they start in good nature, right? There are a couple companies in the agency that have been started. For example, does everybody know the Everest Shipping Company? Probably have seen. Um, you'll see like they see it's a global shipping company. The Everest transportation system, right? There is a the Everest shipping company used to be a CIA friend company. Um, Look, okay, I'm going to get in a bit of a tangent. I'm not going to actually go down that road. What I will tell you is that have been reasons initially why they needed to get people within in order to help certain operations where certain countries that one of the main ways of access was going into the drug trade. So they would start approaching it by maybe there's a couple creative different ways that you could do this, right? And it have been done, which is essentially creating their own fictitious company or cartel or section of a cartel in order to infiltrate this thing, right? And then that's how it starts. And then, you know, these guys sometimes they make money, they get successful, and sometimes these things don't stop when the mission is done, or it gets redirected and people start making money and shit gets redirected and shit that started out essentially as a good idea for a mission ends up turning in to a legacy or reoccurring thing where they're stealing money. And a lot of times because they're already doing illegal shit or doing shit um through the government through a level of plausible deniability, they think they can get away with it. And a lot of times they do, but sometimes they get fucking caught. So now, yeah, people playing music, I think that there are people who do listen to music before they go on hits. I definitely, I saw this more in the tier one organizations. I'll be honest. When I was in, when I was with fifth group, I didn't see this personally, but I saw it in the tier ones. Who definitely listen to music doing shit, going out, right? But um, so fifth group seems the most serious of the SF groups that I've met. Ferris yes. So what one of SF's, so each group has a nickname. Actually, I have a couple nicknames, but one of the nicknames for fifth group was the Fifth Ranger Regiment because they were considered the most ranger-esque of all the Green Beret special forces groups. When DJ Shipley came under fire, people refused to listen. When it finally came out, the employee was a shitbag. Yeah. Uh, there's definitely they definitely recruit from certain universities, but honestly, you could just go on and apply. Like it's not they don't recruit as much as they used to directly, like because they get so many different applicants nowadays. There are definitely some legacy people or some people within certain networks of certain colleges who definitely get find their way being recruited. That there is a kernel of truth to that. Um, yeah. Hmm. If you like video games, you should play a squad with viewers. It would be fun and can play Spade, plays real world special forces, conventional forces, and you look of all the shooting games. All right, look, I like to do hard shit. All right, I like to do shit that's punishing. And if anybody knows what is probably the most punishing shooter game out there, is probably the shooting game that I've played the most. And if anybody has ever played Escape from Tarkov, that is the most punishing shit ever. So if I was ever to play a shooting game, right? Honestly, see, I already beat you to it. Yes. is I started playing Escape from Tarkov when I was in flight school, actually. So about 2020, 2021. Um, so I have not played in a while. Okay, so I haven't played Escape from Tarkov in about a year. No, 2 years, I think. So obviously, um, I know that they finally released the final game, and now you can actually finish the game, right? And I've been talking to a couple friends who I used to play Escape from Tarkov with, and we're thinking about essentially running it. And so that might be one of the things that I do is um play. Yeah, I heard there was a lot of big changes, pistol shooter. Um, so I definitely want to play that. So there's a couple of games that I play, right? I do Escape from Tarkov, and of course, if you do an extraction shooters or extraction games, because I never played an extraction shooter or extraction game before, but once you play Escape from Tarkov, like right, like you never get bored. Like I mean, I can't tell anybody's not played Escape from Tarkov, right? Like you can play other shooting games, but then when you play Escape from you can get bored. You never get bored in Escape from Tarkov, like because you never have a moment where shit can just suddenly go fucking wrong. You know, hey, I appreciate you, Rack Shadow. Thank you for stopping by. Right. So another extraction game is like a D&D version. And anybody's ever played Dark and Darker? It's basically like the first person, like Dungeons and Dragons extraction shooter game. Right. So I played that. That's actually pretty cool. Right. But I also play other games. I really like RPGs. I'm actually currently playing, like, and I know people are going to come at me because it was 4 years old, but I'm finally playing Elden Ring right now. Elden Ring, because I love RPGs. Like, for example, my two favorite RPGs, Baldur's Gate 3 and Divinity Original Sin 2. Right? So, um, yeah, so I'm thinking about definitely I've been asked by a couple people. I actually got asked by one of my sponsors to play video games. Specifically, my the guy who runs the creatine company, the creatine company's company, Tasty Gains. He wants me to stream video games. Bro, Command and Conquer was my first video game. I played the OG Command and Conquer. Actually, I'll take you back even one further. I played. Do you know? So Westwood Studios made Command and Conquer. Do you know what Command and Conquer's first strategy game was? It wasn't or Westwood Studios. Do you know what Westwood Studios' first PC strategy game was? It wasn't Command and Conquer. It was the strategy game Dune. Dune, like about like the Dune. And not only did I play this, so to load the game, it had 4 floppy disks. That's how you loaded this game. This was pre-CD, right? And that was their first, Westwood Studios' first strategy game was actually Dune. I don't know if it's technically Dune 2. I think that's actually technically the title. But yeah, that shit was on floppy disk, and I played that shit on the floppy disk, bro. Did I play Metal Gear Solid? Absolutely, bro. I played Metal Gear Solid, bro. I like, and also I played more RPGs. I played WoW. I play, I played Star Wars Galaxy, the original Star Wars RPG. I played SWOTAR. I actually played SWOTAR for a bit. Um, uh, yeah, what other? But I like turn-based RPG games. I love RPG games just in general. I like to dabble a little bit. I was obviously really big into Halo. Um, but bro, I'm a giant fucking nerd, bro. You want to get me on a fucking tangent? You want to watch me on a 10-hour fucking live? Let's talk Warhammer, bro. Let's talk Warhammer lore. Right? Right? You want to nerd out, bro? I'm in it, bro. Like you want to like no, I've never played Manhunt by Rockstar. Baldur's Gate, I'm telling you, look, Baldur's Gate 3 was awesome, but I was already a fan of Larian Studios. I was Divinity Original Sin 2, bro, changed how I thought about turn-based RPG games. That game is fucking amazing. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is awesome, like a definitely improvement, but the customization of the lack of classes in Baldur's Gate 2, or not Baldur's Gate 2, but Divinity Original Sin 2, fucking amazing. And I cannot wait with the success, the greatest part about Baldur's Gate 3, which is amazing, right? Best Baldur's Gate ever. The best part about that is that Larian Studios got so much fucking success that their game, like their true passion, which is the Divinity series, right? Because remember, Larian Studios was limited on what they could do with Baldur's Gate 3 because they still had to, the source material is still D&D or the Forgotten Realms company. Divinity is their own IP. So they get to do whatever the fuck they want with it, right? And they're taking the success from Baldur's Gate 3 and all the fucking money they made, and they're pouring that shit into their real fucking project. So I cannot wait for basically Divinity 3, which is I think is just Divinity. Oh, dude, I can't fucking wait. That game is gonna be fucking sick. Red Dead Redemption, fuck yeah, bro. You know what's funny? Red Dead Redemption. You know what? I'm gonna be completely honest. I know that everybody likes Red Dead Redemption 2. I have not played it. So I stopped playing video games for a while just because I was out of flight school and I needed to get my shit together. So I took a break from video games, but I recently have gotten back into it. Because I have an obsessive personality and I want to be the best at something, right? So if I get into Escape from Tarkov or if I get into Elden Ring or I'm in like any game, I'm in there. I'm doing the fucking research. I'm going to fucking Fextra Life and I'm getting into the mathematics of the builds and we're getting crazy up in here, right? It's fucking real, bro. So, but no, I've not played any of the I think other than the original Ghost Recon, I don't think I played any of the two Ghost Recon. So I'll definitely start looking at streaming video games. All right. And Pixel Shooter, will definitely if you want, you could be one of the first people that we play Tarkov with. And you can show my ass around the fucking thing. I think that would be sweet. No, bro. I'm not joking, bro. Look, there's things I don't fucking joke about. And anybody's ever played about Escape from Tarkov, bro, you don't joke about Escape from Tarkov, bro. That game's too serious. Like if you guys have never seen me cry, you want to see a grown man cry? Watch me play Escape from Tarkov and be fucking feet from the exit with all my fucking loot. I got fucking quest items and watch me get shot by a fucking camper, bro, or some other stupid shit like that. Or watch me fucking cry. Dude, it'll be awesome, dude. Escape from Tarkov, especially the beginning part when you got nothing, you got to piece together your weapons and your kits, and you got to make do with fucking shit, or like your shit is so bad when you have to pick up shit on the fly. I love that part. I love the scavenging part of the fucking Escape from Tarkov. Um, Grown men don't play video games, bro. Like I'm gonna be honest. Um, Look, there's a balance in life, right? If you can get all your shit done and then you want to play some fucking video games, you do that, bro. You get what you need, right? If video games get in the way of you getting your life together and doing whatever you need to be doing, then obviously you don't. But if you can do that and then fucking play some fucking video games, bro, there's so much cool shit in video games. You can get fucking lost. I will be honest. You can get fucking lost. I've been lost in video games. I've definitely let some shit go by the wayside, right? So that's why I have to control myself. But if we're streaming and playing video games, am I hitting the best of both worlds? Mm, I think possibly. I think this is why this is a um look, I'm not gonna lie. For example, um, look, I don't know if you guys have seen, I have a ridiculous rig computer. All right, let me see. I have so I built this. All right, so let me take this. All right. So I've got three monitors. All right, got a widescreen TV, and I have a PC that I built. I built the fucking thing, right? So I don't I don't fuck around when it comes to this shit, right? All right, if we're gonna do something, one, you have a great workstation, but you gotta play some games, right? And then when I'm done with the stream, what I do, I reward myself, right? I like to play a little hour or two. I've actually never played Dawn to Dusk, but we are gonna play some Elden Ring after this. Yeah, bro. I'm like the biggest fucking nerd, dude. I will tell you, I surprised the shit out of people. Okay, so true story, true fucking story, right? One of the coolest thing about SF teams in 18 Echoes is that all our team houses were wired for LAN gaming during OIF, right? So Halo 2, when did Halo 2 come out? All right. 2004. When did Halo 3 come out? All right, it was Halo 3. All right, we were in Iraq. We're Halo 3 in our 18 Echoes for our team house, set up in our team in our room. They set up three different TVs, all facing away each from each other. And so we had um three, it was like it was either 4v4, but then if we had enough people, we would do like either I couldn't even remember, you could do 6v6 or you do three teams of four and we'd play fucking Halo. And then a bunch of us were also fucking computer nerds and we played Dawn of War 2. Right? Oh no, it's the original Dawn of War. The original Dawn of War, which is the 40K strategy game. We played that against each other on our laptops in the team house but the 18 Echoes set up the whole LAN system to game. Um yeah, so yeah, that's the best thing about Special Forces communications guys, the 18 Echoes. They set up the killer LAN parties when you're gaming overseas, bro. Indispensable. All right. Some people say the 18 Deltas are indispensable. Bro, it's the 18 Echoes. I'm telling you, they get shit done. There's nothing like internet. When your internet goes down, that's your best friend. Yeah, we would. Yeah, so for our team, we played Halo and Dawn of War. Obviously, other teams play other games, but yeah, it is. It is. It is. It is what it is. Man, I appreciate you guys. Look, so there's a guy. For his name is he's Nick. He's a friend of Ethan Nagels, the one who does the Into the Breach podcast, and they do occasionally. He's also a big Warhammer nerd. So we actually plan to eventually do no shit a fucking episode where he flies us all in, and we're gonna do a big Warhammer podcast. That shit will be fun, right? So I want to do other things, right? I want to fucking nerd it out. I want to do shit more with the fucking community, and just have fucking fun at the end of the day. Oh shit. Hmm. That something was fucked up for a second. Okay. So I think I'm starting to see the temperature line. You've never played Warhammer, bro? So Warhammer. Okay, so remember that there's two things. There's Warhammer Fantasy and there's Warhammer 40K, right? You don't, in my personal opinion, I played both tabletop, right? And that's the point. I don't just play the video games. I played the fucking tabletop, and I played the tabletop in. I started playing in the late '90s. All right, that's how long I've been plucking in Warhammer. Right, we're coming on 30 fucking years. About to come on my 30th anniversary of fucking playing Warhammer. Right, and I played Warhammer 40K tabletop, and I played Warhammer Fantasy tabletop. Luckily, I don't really feel like you need to play Warhammer Fantasy tabletop anymore because we have Total War Warhammer, right? And that scratches the itch for me more than the tabletop ever did, right? Warhammer 40K, I've always been a fashion. And look, I may have 8 armies. All right. I may have 8 armies. I may have an entire fucking shelf of fucking Warhammer fucking models, right? What do they call it? My pile of shame or fucking I forget what's the fucking term. Um but and I've got everything. I mean, I've got Imperial Knights, I've got Necrons, I've got fucking orcs, Tau, fucking bro. But I will tell you, you know what my original army was? And you guys are probably not going to surprise, but I swear to God, this is not by fucking accident, right? I walk into my very first Warhammer store and I see the original cover in the 90s for the Space Wolves. I see a Viking basically dude power armor on the snow, basically with this giant fucking power axe killing it, and I was like, done. I'm Space Wolves all the way through. So I am the OG. My OG army is this fucking Space Wolves, and they will always be, and they're still my like, um. And so I do a bunch of 3D printing, and I actually do a bunch of, for example, I don't like the Wolfen models, and I create my own Wolfen models. Like I do some shit. I'll throw some pictures up here one of these days. All right. So yeah, super nerd status. Fucking. But I also love the lore. I've read. I love the Horus Heresy series, especially the beginning. I've read the first like 50 books of the Horus Heresy series. I have not watched any in a while. Video game lowers aura, level up in real life by doing projects. Look, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. Um, but I enjoy it. I enjoy video games, but with anything, with any hobby, right? It needs to be done responsibly. Don't let it take over your life. Um, yeah. Don't let GW know about your models, right? They might come after me, right? Um, we know how we know how GW is, right? They might come after me, but yeah, the 40K books, dude. If anybody doesn't know, they literally have authors, like multiple authors, good authors on staff who all they do is write fucking books. I mean, you want to talk about there people think like Star Wars and Star Trek are like expansive universes lore. Nothing compares to how expansive the lore in 40K is. It's crazy. Yeah. So, all right, boys. I think we're gonna call it. I think this might be one of our longest streams yet. What do we got? 2.5 hours? Yeah, it's 2.5 hours. All right. I appreciate you guys. All right. We got to get some shit done, but I will try. Honestly, we'll give it a shot. I like I said. Oh, chess is awesome. I think chess is a great fucking game. I just love strategy games. I think that's one of the reasons why I like CRPGs and TTRPGs, like because I love turn-based RPGs. So, but I just love strategy in general. So, I think it's one of the reasons why I like Warhammer 40K tabletop and all the different things. Which is also I'm really excited for not only Dawn of War. Is it Dawn of War 4? Yeah, Dawn of War 4, and then Total War is now making 40K. So I'm excited for that too. So you guys have a great weekend. Thank you for stopping in. I appreciate all of you, and I will talk to you guys later.